Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Nim Grinvald. I'm joined here today by my colleagues Genji and Will. We are here to teach you about React, to share with you about Kintone, hooking up React to Kintone, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. There are a few things for you to do before we kick off today. If you haven't done so already, first and foremost, download the code and the slides. You can get that information right over here, and then you're going to git clone the GitHub repository. Then if you have not done so already, please sign up for a developer account with Kintone and create your first Kintone subdomain, which will be part of your developer license, your free developer license. And then just another thing that you should know about how we do these workshops. We like to have fun over here. That's why we talk about ice cream and other countries around the world. If you've clicked on that GitHub link from that last slide, you should be taken to a page that looks like this. And this is going to instruct you to git clone your repository where we will be working today. We will be working on a branch that has some deliberately missing pieces, and we're going to use those. We're going to be filling in those pieces and getting a big picture understanding of what's going on. If you're wondering, well, how will I know if it's all right? If I don't keep up with everything, can I check on it? The answer is yes. We have a branch on there that has everything already completed. So if need be, you can always refer to that, which I recommend you do after the workshop, so that you can have the opportunity to consolidate your gains and make sure that you got what you got. So we're going to use this repository as the starting point. What you'll do is in that repository, once you've git cloned that repository, you'll now have a folder called React Workshop by Kintone. Okay, go ahead into that folder, React Workshop by Kintone. Then you're going to cd into that, and what you'll discover is that folder React Workshop by Kintone has two subdirectories in it, front end and back end. What you're going to do is you're going to go into front end, and then you're going to npm install your front end. What that's going to do is we're going to start basically downloading the packages that we need, all of our dependencies to build what we're looking to build. The second thing you're going to do is while that's running, and it might take a minute or so to run, make sure you've signed up for your developer account. Again, that link is right over here. Make sure you are using Google Chrome or Firefox as your browser of choice for this, and make sure that you're accepting cookies. Once you have signed up for that developer account, you're going to create a subdomain. Make sure your subdomain has no special characters. We're looking for alphanumeric and hyphens only. So maybe yours will be, like nim-g. Well, yours won't be that, but mine would be like nim-g.kintone.com. That would be my the path to my subdomain. Genji's might be like genjiisawesome.kintone.com. Make yours special, make yours count. A little bit about us. My name is Nim Grinvald. I'm the technical evangelist here at Kintone. My job is to help you to see what's possible with our platform, with our Kintone platform, and to have it be a valuable tool in your toolbox to solve problems that you may encounter. That's my job over here at Kintone. That's what I do as a technical evangelist. Joining me today are my colleagues Will and Genji, who are developer advocates. I mentioned that I'm located in Berkeley, California. Genji and Will are located in Tokyo, Japan. So they're all the way around the world, or if you're going the other way, they're a hop around the pond from me. It's like a 17-hour hop. That's no joke. Our role here is to just have you learn something, have you get what you like the most out of our time together today. Genji and Will, do either or both of you want to add something to what I've said so far?
Saying hi, I'm Will. I'm a developer advocate, so I play around with Kintone a lot. So connecting it to React or connecting it to VR. And Genji and I are open up for questions, so if you can just post those in the chat. Wherever you're stuck, it doesn't need to be like you don't need to ask a question. No, ask a question anytime. Basically, it doesn't need to be about React. It might be just like I can't get my Kintone subdomain. As happens all the time. So just post it in the chat, and we'll be with you to help you out, so you can follow along with the workshop.
Okay, everybody, buckle up. And strap yourself in. We're going to get on a roller coaster today, and we're going to stop when we're done. What are we going to be doing? Well, the roller coaster today is on getting and posting data from a web database from React. And so this is what we're going to make today. We're going to create connections between a front-end environment that's coded in React to and we're going to make get and post calls from that front end to a routing server, which will then be handling our calls to the Kintone database and serving calls back through the routing server to the front end. We've done a lot of the coding for you, and we've left places empty strategically so that we can talk about the interesting stuff and give you a big picture of how everything works. So what we're going to make today, so we've got a Kintone database that's a MongoDB, okay, and it's got records in it that are Mango records that we were showing in this list of records. And what we're going to do is we're going to present those records, and then we're going to also be able to add records to that. Those records are going to be they're going to be presented in React and then sent to the backend, where then when we refresh the page, we'll see that we've been successful at making our post call, and Kintone now has the data. Okay, so if you have not done so already, please make sure that you git cloned the repo. And Genji, could you please drop the link in the chat in case anyone still hasn't cloned that repo yet? You'll move into the React Workshop by Kintone subdirectory, and then go ahead and fire up VS Code. And then we want to make sure that your versions of Node and NPM are properly updated. So what you're going to need is a version of Node that's greater than or equal to 10.16. And with NPM, it's going to be version greater than or equal to 5.6. If your versions of Node or NPM are not updated, you can go ahead and Genji's dropped the link inside of the chat, so you can you can follow along and install Node and NPM as appropriate. Okay, and this is what we're also going to want you to do. We're going to have you open up a terminal and have a terminal for each folder. So you should have two. You should have a front end folder and a back end folder that are subdirectories for this React Workshop by Kintone. So what you see over here is I'm in React Workshop by Kintone. Oops. Oh, come on. So I'll have a front end folder and a back end folder. And what I'll do is I'm going to CD into front end, and I'm going to npm install, and then I'm going to npm start. And I'll do the same thing in my backend folder as well. Okay. So ultimately, what you should have is in your front end folder, once you've npm installed and you've npm started, what that's going to do in the front end is it's going to launch the React development server, and then your browser should fire up with a tab that'll show you your development environment. On the back end, when you hit npm start on your back end, you'll see we've kicked off a daemon behavior that's it's called nodemon, and what it does is it sits there and listens on the port, and then as we update our back end, the server will automatically restart as changes are saved. So this is what it'll look like on your back end, and this is what it'll look like on your front end. And then if you want to have another terminal over here that you can get into the folders if you need to, you're more than welcome to. But for now, it's just your front end and your back end. So again, npm install and npm start on both your front end and your backend folders. What we're doing is we're spinning up two servers. We're spinning up our React development environment. This is our front end, and we're spinning up, and that's going to be on port 3000. And then on port 5000, we're spinning up our routing server. So it's going to be listening for communication. Perfect. Yeah. Href, if what you see is React app now loading in your development server, this is exactly where you want to be. Great. Great. This is exactly what you should see once you've npm started on your front end and that browser tab is kicked off. Perfect indeed. Okay, so what does your repository look like? Well, your repository in VS Code is going to have the following structure to it. We've already talked about a backend and a front end folder. Okay. The important things for us to look at are your backend is going to have a server.js file and a file that's .env.example. And then on the front end, we've got a public folder, which for our purposes, all we need to worry about is index.html. In fact, we don't even need to worry about it. It's more just like, I'm notifying you that the way this code works is it's going to involve something with index.html, but we're not going to touch it. And then the source, we've got our app.js, our index.js, and a components folder and a requests folder that have our components and requests respectively. Here's a cut at the information in a little bit more detail. Our React components are going to be in our components folder as well as in app.js. We're going to have this .env file, which will hold our credentials. And then our server.js and our requests are going to handle our API calls. You might wonder, well, what about index.js? And we'll get to that shortly. Mainly, we won't have to worry about it. The files that we are going to be editing are the following starred items. So as you can see, we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us. Let's keep going. And so in order for us to start talking meaningfully about our entire project, we're going to first talk about Kintone, what it is, how it works, and why it matters to you and to what we're building today. So Kintone is a no-code, low-code cloud platform. It enables teams to easily share and collaborate on their data efficiently. And what's special about it is that if you're a business user working in just like a typical environment where there's operations that happen, like, for example, handling expense reports or handling anything that needs to be tracked, anything that you have a database for. Typically, the data and the conversations about the data are in different places. So what do I mean by that? Well, you've got your data, which might be a Word document, it might be a spreadsheet, it might be a bunch of records, it might be a database, and that's actually the data that's being held there. It's held in a different place than the place that you go and you talk about that data, which is over emails or over Slack or, in, God forbid, Facebook Messenger. Man, I'm like delivering like a really opinionated workshop today. Like, Japan's great, Facebook, boo. Like, you've got your data and your conversations about the data. They live in different places, and that creates a lot of friction in the way work happens. With Kintone, the data and the conversations about the data are all in one place. So what that makes possible is you take away this friction. You're able to look at the stuff that you're talking about and bring people to that stuff and have a conversation right there with the context, like embedded in the context. So Kintone also has workflow setups where you can create process management. So for example, legal document reviews, hiring, expense reports where you submit expense reports, they get passed along to a manager, then depending on some conditional criteria, those things then get sent along either to an accounting department or to a VP. You want to make sure that the right people are seeing the right thing at the right time. And so why is this important to you? Well, it has to do with something we call apps, right? You can imagine an app as a table in a database, or a spreadsheet in a workbook, only with more power. And that's the building block of Kintone, is that is an app. And so with Kintone apps, you can build them very quickly with a drag and drop interface with no coding needed. And then you can also customize them with client-side JavaScript. And so what happens with what then happens is that for people who are allergic to technology, for people who are not as technically inclined as maybe you are or I am, they can build stuff without needing to code. So they can now do things that they were not able to do before and bother you with. Like if you've ever had that family member that doesn't know how to connect to their Wi-Fi and they want your help with it, what would it be like if you could teach them how to fish, or if you could make getting their Wi-Fi set up so easy that they didn't need to ever ask you for it? It's amazing. And that's one of the promises of Kintone, is that for the non-technical users who touch it, that they can create stuff without bugging you and have that stuff be like genuine solutions to their issues. And then for you as a developer, if they have more like a heavy lift for requirements, or if there's more trouble afoot, you can do more valuable, interesting work, either enhancing the apps with JavaScript, for example, or if you're in an IT department and business users are using Kintone, that allows you to focus up on when you're more like on your tier 1 and tier 2 projects. So ultimately, Kintone is designed to fulfill the promise of groupware, to share meaningful insights about the data that become operationalized quickly. So you've got the stuff, you're talking about the stuff, you're doing it all in one place. So it's easier to get valuable insights and then take action appropriately. Okay, so what does this mean to you as a developer? A few things. So when as a developer, you can create a command center, like a place where you want to land on and see what's going on, like a more powerful version of Trello or Asana, where you've got your data all in one place. Then you have a layer above the presentation layer, like a collaboration layer, above the data layer. Sorry, there we go. The data layer, and then you've got like the presentation layer. This is where the collaboration happens with comments and process management. But for this to happen, we need developers to build the integrations, to integrate with these third-party web applications to exchange data, and to develop these JavaScript customizations, and then to build and share those extensions. Inside of Kintone, we have many different tools to make that happen. There's a REST API, a JavaScript API. We have API tokens, which we'll be touching today. There are webhooks, which trigger data payloads that get sent to some RESTful endpoint based on user event-driven behavior in our GUI. Plugins, JavaScript customization. So there's a lot of things that you can do to play with Kintone and to make it valuable for business users, or to make it your own. I love these two examples. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we've created a data visualization called Bubble Cloud that allows us to drag and drop or just drag bubbles around and be able to compare different records by magnitude. And on the right-hand side, we've got a Space Invaders game that's embedded inside of Kintone, which should give you some sense of the capabilities of the platform that to a non-technical user might seem simple and accessible, but to a technical user, in addition to being simple and accessible, is also highly extensible with deep integration and extension capabilities. So as a developer, you can use Kintone as a self-learning tool, either to learn new JavaScript, to contribute what you've learned to tech blogs for perhaps a career positioning, or just to be a contribution, to share your project with the community. And then if you're looking to create revenue with Kintone, that you can create and sell Kintone extensions, you can consult with firms on achieving business goals and develop Kintone customizations for customers. So this is what Kintone is, how it works at a very high level, and why it's valuable to you. What we're going to do next is we're going to create a Kintone database app. If this is your first time with us, we're going to create your first app. If this is not your first time with us, we're going to create your IF app. Let's go. The first thing you're going to do is, if you have not done so already, please log into Kintone. And once you do, and you click on the you'll click on the Kintone button, you'll be taken to a portal. And this portal is the first thing that people see when they sign up. It's got, or when they hit the platform, and it's got some things that would be intuitive to you if this weren't a blank canvas. So right now this is a blank canvas, but ultimately this space should have information about like, where's my most important data? Where is the data that I touch on a regular basis? Where is the new data or the data that needs my immediate attention? Ultimately, it'll all be here on this portal. What we're going to do is we're going to create our first app. Now, remember, an app is like a table in a database or a spreadsheet in a workbook, only with more power behind it. Let's see what I mean. Click on that plus sign over here in this apps pane. And what we'll do is we're going to be taken to a page called Kintone Marketplace. There are many different ways that you can create an app. You can do it from a template. You can do it from an Excel file or a CSV. We're going to create an app from scratch. So we'll click on that, create an app from scratch. And when you do, actually, before I go any further, you've clicked on create an app from scratch. Please raise your hand if you are up to speed. You've clicked on create an app from scratch. Okay, great. Paul, Atraf, Christopher, Jose, Payal, Arthur, Ruby, Sebastian, Jaswanth, Gurmeet, Daniela, terrific, terrific. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you. If you are, yeah, I see we've got a thumbs down from someone. Can't quite see who that is at the moment. Okay, you disappeared back into the audience, whoever you are. If you're having trouble at this point, go ahead and reach out to Genji or Will, and they will assist you. For those of you who are with us, you're going to click on create an app from scratch. And I'm sorry, one more thing is this deck you should be able to download as a PDF. So if you're running a little bit behind, everything is laid out for you over here. And if there's something that you're stuck on, just send a chat to Genji or Will, and they'll be happy to assist you. I couldn't find Kintone Marketplace from the site. So what you'll do, Febin, is you're gonna, once you get to this portal, Febin, are you here at this portal? Let me just get a quick yes or no from you. You're gonna go to your subdomain.kintone.com. Did I lose you? Hey, Febin. Okay, great. Yes, so you got to this portal, you're gonna click on this plus sign. Terrific. That plus sign for apps, and then you're going to click on create an app from scratch. Okay. From here, we're going to first rename our app. We're going to do that by clicking on where it says new app, and we're going to change that to MangaDB. So now we've changed the name of our app, and what we're going to do is we're going to use this drag and drop interface. And what you'll see is there's like 29 different fields that we can drag and drop from the palette on the left-hand side to the canvas on the right-hand side. We're going to add 2 text fields. Text field is the top selection in the right-hand column. Drag and drop 2 text fields, just like that. Okay. And now what we're doing actually is we're creating our database schema. We're doing it in a way that's dead simple, really. And now what we want to do is we need to configure these text fields to hold the information that we want. Gurmeet, what you'll do is you're going to create an app from scratch. And then you're going to you're going to rename the app to MongoDB. And then you'll drag and drop 2 text fields. Diaz G15, you make sure that you're using Chrome and Firefox and that you have cookies accepted. And if you have that already done, check in with Genji or Will, and they'll be able to assist you. So we've added 2 text fields, and now what we want to do is we want to configure them to hold our post data. and actually to hold our data to hold all of our data. So we want, since we're making a MongoDB, we want a title and an author. So we need to distinguish these two text fields from each other, and we'll do it by going into the field settings. So you'll click on those field settings, and then what you'll see is there's a few things that you need to change. The first is the name. This is going to be facing you. So we want to move it from text to title. And then there's something called a field code over here. This field code is the unique identifier that on the backend side that we use to make sure we're pushing and pulling data from the correct and specified field. All of those field codes are unique. You'll change the title field to the field code title, all lowercase, and you're going to do the same thing with author. It'll say text, you'll change that to author, and then the field is going to say author. So, oops. So there those changes happen, and here we go, title and author, okay? And now what we want to do is we want to access the data that we've got over here programmatically. So it's not, we don't want to just use the GUI to type in the username and password. We want our code, we want our routing server to be able to access the Kintone database programmatically. And so we need to configure a way to do that. And we do that with an API token. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to through the following settings, titles to get to the API token. So first, you'll see there are 4 tabs at the top of these Kintone settings: form, views, graphs, and app settings. Click on app settings. And then in the second column in the middle, underneath the customization and integration panel, there's a setting for API token. Click on that, and then you will be taken to the API token page. We're going to click generate, and then you will check off view and add records, right? You'll check off view and add records, and from there, you're going to copy your API token. This will come in handy momentarily. Copy this string and click on that blue save button at the top left side of the page. So generate an API token, view and add records, copy that API token, save that page, and then you're going to click activate app, and this will spin up your app. Okay. Once you've done that, you'll be taken back to the main page, and it'll say something like, congratulations, you created your first app. Now put some data in it, something like that. And once you click it back into that app, you'll see that it's empty, which is exactly what we expect. We just created a data schema. We actually have no data in it, but we want to start filling it with some titles and authors. So click on that plus sign over here at the top right corner of the page. Once you're in your MongoDB app, click on that, and you'll be taken to a record detail page. It's a new record. We're going to add new records. Please add the title and author of whatever your favorite manga is. Manga. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Genji, how does one pronounce that word?
Manga.
Manga. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. If whatever your favorite manga is, if you've never read a manga like me, I've never read one in my entire life. Just put your favorite book in, or your favorite, go nuts. Title and author, movie and director, break your schema, whatever it is. Just make sure that there are 2 fields and they roughly correspond to the name of a thing and the name of the person who made the thing. Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci. I don't care. Whatever you'd like. Okay. You can sanitize your data. You can sanitize your data inputs later. For the moment, just make sure you have some kind of rough. You've got 2 to 3 records over here. Okay. And then what you'll actually notice is you'll create one, and then you can click on this this duplicate button where my mouse is hovering right over here, and that'll just send you straight into another record that you can create. So again, create 2 or 3 of these, and then click on this blue MongoDB link, and you'll be able to view all of the records. So this is where you'll be able to see the records that you put in. Okay. We're going to start moving from the front end to the back end. And so what we're going to do is we're going to connect our Kintone subdomain to our code. And then what we're going to do is we're going to spin up our front end and our back end. If you haven't already done that, we'll go ahead and do it at that time. If you have done that, great, no problem. And then we're going to follow along with the behavior that's already in the code that you're given and learn how React, and we're going to start seeing how everything comes together. Okay, so the first place that we're going to look is our backend. Because what we want to do is we're going to connect our Kintone subdomain. Right. So let's take a look at what we've got over here. So you should all have a backend with node modules in it. If you do not have node modules in it, that means you have not npm installed. So go into your terminal and go into your backend folder and then npm install those node modules. And let's take a look at what's going on over here. So we need some way for our Kintone credentials to be injected into our code. We don't want to hard code them inside the code because they may change, or we might want to push this code up to a public repository, and we don't want to expose credentials to just anybody on GitHub. So we have to be thoughtful about the way that we do that. And we're going to use something called environmental variables in order to make that happen. So you should have a file called .env.example. And this is a file that we're going to use as a template to set up our, to input our credentials. So what you'll see is I've duplicated this .env.example file, and I've renamed it .env. Okay. And then for the subdomain, I'm going to put the name of the subdomain that I'm working with. So for you, that'll be whatever was the name of the subdomain that you created when you started today. So yours, so mine is dev events, right? Which is the full domain is devevents.kintone.com. But we just want that first piece, that subdomain, dev events. Yours is going to be whatever it is. Okay. And then the second thing you're going to want is you're going to want your app ID. So in your Kintone environment, remember that app that we just created 7 minutes ago? That has a number that's associated with it in the URL. Whatever your subdomain.kintone.com is /k/whatever this number is. Now note, you have to be in, there are certain pages you have to be in order to see this. If you're in your record list, you'll see this. So you should be looking at like 2 or 3 records or however many you've created, and you're going to look for that number. Now, if this is your first time ever building a Kintone app, that number should be 1. But we've built a whole bunch of apps before on our side, so ours is going to be 27. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to type in your API token, and it'll be whatever, sorry, not type in, you're going to paste that copied API token that you had put in. That's the place you're going to put it in. And then you're going to save. Okay. There we go. You're going to save. And at this point in time, if you have not yet npm started your browser tabs for your front end and your back end, now is the time to do it. Okay. So you're going to npm start in your backend folder. You're going to npm start in your front end folder. And both of those terminal tabs are now going to be occupied by running processes. If you need a new command prompt, you'll need to open up another terminal tab. So now you've npm started your front end, you've npm started your back end, and so now we should have two servers that are running. One is your routing server, which is listening on port 5000 for any communication, and then your React development server should kick up on port 3000. This is your front end, and it should look at the moment something like this. All right, let's start the fun. Actually, we're continuing the fun. And we're going to start on our front end. Okay, so the React boilerplate starts us in whatever is labeled index.js. And what you'll notice over here, first and foremost, is that we're importing some packages. We're importing React, React DOM, and the app component from the app file. What you'll notice is that React starts to render the app inside of this strict mode, and it connects to the HTML by hanging off of an element called root. I'm going to show you where root is in index.html, just so that you know what it looks like. Okay, it's right over here. This is the place where all of the React behavior cascades from. And that's all we need to know about index.html. And it's actually also all we need to know about index.js as well, because all of our action is going to be happening inside of app. Okay, so what's happening with app? Well, we're doing some importing, okay? And ultimately, we want to be able to hang a list of items over here, and then some form that lets us add to that list, okay? So that's what we see over here. And so what we've got is we're importing a request function, and we're importing these two components, list, records, and input form. Input form is currently blank. We're going to be filling this out later. Okay, and then we've got some way of handling the state of the data. We're going to get back to that in a little while. Our components to we want to show stuff in React. We want to have React manage the rendering. Okay, that's what React does. React is a way of organizing our code so that we can easily track what it is that we're showing and what is the data that's connected to those things, and what's the relationship between stuff showing and data changing. And so you'll see we have a list records component, and we'll add another form component over here. So what about these other functions that we're importing? So you'll see we've got a get records request and a post records request. And I'm going to quickly go over the get records request. What we're doing over here is we have set an endpoint, and we are setting up so let me back up a second. Get records does exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. We're going to send an API call off to Kintone with your credentials, and it's going to come back with a list. And we need to be able to parse that list in a way that's useful. And so what we're going to do first is set up the fetching of that information. And we do that over here with these two lines, okay? And then from there, we need to interpret the data that we received and transform it into something that's going to be useful for us. And so that's what's happening in this next area over here, is that we are taking the JSON response that we've received once we've fetched that information. We're going to map it. We're going to do a one-to-one transform of each record in that array. We're going to transform it into a list item. that has a unique key, and it says title written by author. And so what we're doing is for each record, we're grabbing the unique record number, we're grabbing the title, and we're grabbing the author, and these are the names of the field codes that you put in not too long ago. If you put in different field codes than the ones that we gave you, your code will break, so be aware. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return this list item array of list items. Now, you might wonder, well, what is HTML doing in here? Isn't this JavaScript code? Can I just like put HTML in willy-nilly? And the answer is, to be honest, it's quite mysterious. On this, well, it's superficially answerable, but then behind the scenes quite mysterious. And that's kind of how React works, is it makes it easy for you to do stuff, but then there's a lot of things happening in the background behind the curtain that you'll never really see. One of those things is the way that React is able to interpret these like snippets of what seems to be HTML and to turn it into turn these seeming fragments of HTML into code that it interprets and understands what to render. So that's what's happening with get records. And so then we've also got this list records component. And so let's take a look at what's happening in list records. Now you might be wondering, very much just like what we saw in app.js, or in index.js rather, we have these things that look like HTML fragments. They're not. This isn't HTML. There's no HTML element called app. There's no HTML element called list records, right? What's happening is React is allowing you to type is to type like a fake HTML element, and then it'll interpret it as whatever you tell it to interpret it as. What's actually happening is there's a function called list records, and it takes in some parameters, some list items, and it outputs something that gets rendered on a page. And so what React lets us do is it allows us to write in a language called JSX, which is like an enhanced JavaScript, and that we can basically type in these HTML-like fragments as syntactic sugar for functions. So it helps us as humans to visualize what's going on here. We've got some list records thing, some component. What's it doing? Let's take a look. Well, this is very simple. It's returning a div with an H1 React app and some props. We haven't talked about props yet. We will in a moment. It takes in some props as parameters and it posts them as a list. This looks very, very similar to what we have so far with our development server. There's some React app in big H1 tags followed by now loading. What is this? How does this make sense? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So here's the deal. Think about what we're asking for over here. Okay, we want a list of records. Okay, how do we get those list of records? Well, we're querying the Kintone service and we're awaiting a response. Okay, well, that's not how a user interacts with a page. A user interacts with a page like, boom, you're here. Now what? Right? There's some interim between something being rendered and something having to be rendered right now on demand, on site, and the tick-tock of the response coming back. So we need some way of handling, first of all, what are we going to show first? Second of all, how do we handle the updating of that data? And then what do we want to show once the data is updated? And so that's what happens in these lines over here. And that's why React uses something called state as like the place where data is held, and where a lot of behind the scenes magic happens to handle the re-rendering of components as the state changes. So you'll see now loading over here. This is beginning to unravel the secret. So we've got something called a state, okay? So a state needs two things. It needs, a state needs two things. It needs an initial value, like it needs a place where the state is held, and then it needs some function to update the state, okay? And so what you'll see on line 17 is us instantiating the state. The state takes it, the state, and so React has a special, what's called a hook, special hook called useState. And what useState does, useState outputs a 2-item array. The first item in the array is the state, and the second item is the function that updates the state. And we're going to initialize useState with our first value, now loaded, which should begin to explain to you what's happening over here. We've rendered the list records component, and we've rendered it with that h1 value, React app, and then with the initial value of the state that we have not yet updated because there's been no fetch request. Okay, so how do we update it? Okay, well, we want to, when certain things happen, we want to be able to update the state. Okay, so what we want to do is at certain predetermined times, we want to do something. That something is going to be to fetch records and then push those records into the state. Okay, so and then ultimately those records, we're going to then want to push them as parameters into our list items component, where they will then be presented. We're going to go to our backend, to our server.js, right? And because something's happening where we kick off this get records function. That get records function is going to fetch, it's going to send a fetch request, it's going to send a get request to a predetermined endpoint on our routing server, right? And so let's take a look at what's going on our routing server. This routing server is built with a lightweight server called Express. Express is very easy to spin up. We're going to require these modules, Express, cores, node fetch. We're going to set the port to 3000 and we're going to instantiate Express. We're going to require .env, which sets up the configuration that we talked about before, where we handle the following sensitive information. These credentials are going to get pushed in at real time. Sorry, at runtime. And then we need a little bit of code here to parse the incoming requests with JSON to make sure that everything is formatted correctly. And then we want to set up cross-origin resource sharing to our front-end React app. So basically what happens with cross-end resource sharing is, so here's the deal. Typically when you're on the web, if I'm on a site like google.com, okay, my browser my browser doesn't, while it's on google.com, it's not, we typically don't want it to be sending off requests to some other domain in the meantime. Like we want all of our requests on google.com to go to google.com. We don't want them to send off to like imabaddomain.com. And so cross-origin resource sharing allows the site that you're on to specify what are the allowable places that you could go, that you could visit while you're on that site. And so we want to make sure that if we're going to be making calls to our backend, that yes, as Ray said, we've whitelisted a certain domain called an origin to make sure that we are recognized and allowed to access our routing server. We're going to keep going, and what you'll see happening over here is we are fetching. Oops, no, there we go. We are setting up URL endpoints. We're setting up API endpoints that are our Kintone API endpoints. There's a multiple records endpoint, which is already set up. That's to get our records. And then there's a single record endpoint that's set up in order to post to a record. And then we've got a parameter string over here, which we drop on the end. Note, this is where we use your subdomain and app ID environmental variables. And then from here, we are creating routing instructions. When we get when we hit the get data path, then do the following thing: send a get request and include this API token as a header. This is the API token we use as an environmental variable, and then go ahead and send that API call to this endpoint with these options. And then when you receive a response, convert it into JSON. And so ultimately, then what's going to happen is we've got our front end server that's going to, let's take a look. Let's do this from front to back and then back again. On some kind of update, I'm going to get the records. So get records is going to send a get request to my routing server. The routing server is going to package up that data and it's going to interpret that. It's going to interpret that get request at the endpoint that it is waiting for that at, and then that route will query the Kintone database and retrieve those records, and then send them back to the get records function, where they will be parsed and returned as list items to be shown in the list records component, which you'll see there's an unordered list over here, and then everything over here is going to be a list of list items. Any questions so far? Okay. So let's start with some coding. It's about time. And what I think makes the most sense for us to do is to start at the back end and start creating that post route. Ultimately, we want to have some kind of a, we want to create a post call that will route to Kintone and return us some indication that a am I dropping over here? Am I getting choppy?
You're a little bit choppy.
Okay. We want that post call to return some indication that the post has been successful or not. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. And what we're going to do first is we're going to create the route. And so we're going to create the route at a path called post data. What we want to do is we want to handle these CORS options. And then we want a callback function to clarify what is going to happen once this function has been hit. Okay, so we're going to want some kind of a body, right? we're going to want some kind of options, right? Then we're going to want to handle the response. So why don't we handle the response part first? So what we're expecting is, there we go. What we're expecting is we're going to make a call to single record endpoint, and we're going to pass in the options. And then what we get next from there, we're going to want to convert into JSON. And then that's going to be our response. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cores options over here versus options over here. So we're passing in cores options, which let us check that that the route that is that the place where we are, that the request that is hitting the post data endpoint is essentially a legal move. And that's distinct from options object over here, which is an outbound options to the Kintone service that is listening for the options on that payload. So remember, this is a routing circle. We're expecting options to come to us. We're expecting options to come away from us. The options that we're going to want to send onward, well, we want to clarify that we're making a post call so that the Kintone service can recognize that there's a post call being made at this endpoint. And we're going to also want to include some headers. We've got the one that will allow us to pass in an API token, right? And then we've got the one that is going to clarify that the kind of information is a application JSON type of content that's coming in. And as for the body, well, what we want to have set up over here is the structure of the payload, the schema of the payload that Kintone is expecting in the particular form that it's expecting, the particular format that it's expecting. So Kintone is expecting to receive an object that's going to have app information in it. What app are you coming from? You're hitting our single record endpoint. Tell us what app do you want to go to, and tell us what you want to get from that place. So you're going to use your app ID, and then we're going to post the following information to that app. We're going to create a new record, and that record has the following information. It's got a title and an author, right? And what you need to know about title and author is it's not as simple as just putting in a value over here, because each field has multiple keys associated with it. So for example, the title field, it's a text field. It has a value to it. So we need so what we need to do is we need to understand that the information that we're putting in is fitting into a larger schema. There's keys and values over here that you're not seeing because they're not important, but they help to explain why like we have this thing called value over here, where it doesn't seem like we need another layer of object to put in a value. Actually, we do. We're just not playing with it today. So this is what Kintone is expecting. It's going to have a request. It's going to look the following way. There are going to be options associated with it. And then the response that we get will be parsed appropriately as a JSON to be passed along to our front end. Okay, well, let's then talk about our front end. So we just coded our backend server. We coded the backend behavior for the routing. And now what we want to do is we want to start building a function that's going to handle the posting on the front end side, right? There's some function that's going to hit that routing server at that post data endpoint. And we've got to build it. So let's build it now. And let's think about what that function needs to have, right? So it's got to have an endpoint to it, right? We've got a routing server that's waiting at an endpoint, and that endpoint is localhost 5,000, exactly like this is where our process is running, right? At port 5,000 at the path post data, which remember this corresponds with, here I am back in my backend server, my routing server here, post data. This is gonna trigger this posting route. So we'll come back to add record endpoint in just a little bit. And let's think about what information we're going to need to pass into post record in order for it to work. Well, we need a title and we need an author because that's what we pass into the request body. Okay, so let's create that request body. It's going to be very simple. It's a title, which is going to be a title. And then if you're smart, I take that back. Not if you're smart. You might know this, you might not. If you don't, welcome, you're going to learn something new today. You can even just use ES6 syntax to just put in author. This is ES6 syntax where if the value of, if the name of a variable is the same as the name of the key, you can just write them as the same thing. That's convenient. Okay, and now we need to handle the options. Remember, these are the options that get passed in. Where do they get passed in? On the backend server, they get passed in as parameters. Right over here. I'm sorry, no, they don't. No, scratch that. Forget I said that. These are options that get that we are setting on our front end side to go to our routing server. And it's a post method, and the headers, well, there are some headers involved. And then we also need a body, which conveniently enough, we've made up here. As far as the headers that we need to move to a routing server, we just need to define it as application.js. So you can see a theme over here. We're creating these post requests that we need to specify the structure of the body. We need to specify any options. We need to handle the data transformation, and also, we need to set up the fetch, set up the request, and then how we interpret the data and transform it when we receive it. So when we receive the response is going to be, we're going to fetch to single record endpoint. Oops, nope, that's not right. It's add record endpoint. That's the one that we set up right above over here. And options, which we created. And then what we're going to do is we're going to want the JSON response to be a transformation of the received response into a JSON. Why don't we add a console log statement in here just so that we can interact with it if needed. So you can see firsthand what the response looks like when we receive it. And then we can return it over here. All right. So we're starting to create we're in the middle of creating our posting behavior. We started at the back end, the routing behavior to Kintone. Now we're in the front end handling the function that's going to hit the routing server. And now what? Well, now let's take a look at what we've got. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to app. We need some kind of a form component where we actually, as users, input the values that we want, the title and the author, and then send them off and kick off that function. That form component is going to be our our input form component. Now, what you need to know about the input form component is that let's do this. What you need to know about the input form component is that this is the component that when it triggers, we want to have our list be our list of items be updated. So let's think about that for a second, right? I want you to imagine, here we are, okay? I want you to imagine we have a form over here. It's got a title input, it's got an author input, it's got like a submit button. We're gonna click the submit button. Now, what do we want to have happen? Well, whatever we're submitting, we want it to be updated in our list of items, right? So we need some kind of a behavior that's going to let us update that list and also post our new information to Kintone. So how do we do that? Well, here's the thing. With React, we've got to be very thoughtful about the. No, let me see this differently. React requires us to be thoughtful about the way we move our data around our web application. Okay, we can't just so what happens is when you start to deal with very sophisticated web applications with a lot of moving parts, getting and posting and pages getting updated as you interact with them, it becomes very difficult to follow along and follow along with what happened, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot or debug something, right? If you've got a lot of crosstalk among different components, it's going to be very hard to wind it back and say, oh, I ran into this issue, how did that happen? So one thing React does to help you is it requires data flow to happen in a very specific way. And that way is from parent to child, from parent to child, from parent to child, from parent to child, okay? If you want to have sibling components talk to each other, right? Like if I have a form and like if I have a form over here and I want some behavior in my form to trigger an updating of a list, then I actually need to have the parent manage whatever that data is so that it can send so that it can talk to its children appropriately and almost like an intermediary handle the data flow between them. So that's what the state is for in this parent component, in this app component. We've got this list of items. We want that list of items to update based on some form submission in the input form component. But we don't, but we want it to update in a separate component, in the list records component. So the list records component is listening for changes to its props, right? Changes to its list items. when list items changes, these props get updated, and then list records updates. But what triggers list items to update? Well, it's that set list items function. Remember, we want some trigger in input form, namely, we want like the submission of a form to trigger the updating of a state, which then gets passed down as props to list records. And so we need to add props over here for input form. In fact, the props we need to pass down is that set list items function. And that's so what we have here is parent has shared its appropriate it's shared appropriate data with its children. It's shared the magic button for updating the state with the input form child, and it's shared the result, the updated, well, the state of the list items with the list records component. And so now one child pushes a button, the state gets updated in the parent, and then that updated state passes down to the child, and then that child component updates. And this is part of the magic of React. That's stuff that's happening behind the scenes that's having everything work really nicely. So let's build our input form component. All right, looks like I need to save post record and I need to save app, no problem. Let's build our, there it is. Let's build our input form component. All right. So first we want to import the required files. And what we're going to want to import is React. This is a React component. And specifically, we want to import the use state hook because there's going to be other things because this component is going to have to manage its own state in the way that it handles its relationship to the form submission and the form inputting. We haven't talked about that yet, but I want you to now understand we're now managing state in two different places. There's the state of the list items and how they get updated. There's going to be some other state that we need to handle, which is what this is for. Okay. Input form gets passed props down. Oops. And also we want to import get records and we want to import post record. And if you're militant about single and double quotes, I'm not your guy today. So what do we want to have happen over here? Let's think about it. So I need a form, and I need certain things to happen on that form. So let's start with what I want to return. Okay, I want to return some HTML, like an HTML fragment that's a form, right? It's going to be a div. Inside of the div is going to be a form. Inside the form, let's make another div. And now let's create, we want three things over here, right? We want a title field, an author field, and a submit button, right? So let's create our first input field. Let's bake a div around our next input field. And then after those two divs, let's have our submit button. Okay. We're going to have that button say post to Kintone. Now let's make this a little bit clearer. This guy over here is our title. This guy over here is our author. And what are the attributes of this input element? Well, it's a text field. It's going to have whatever the value is. It's going to be the that's some value of the title, right? It might be like what is title? We didn't define any title. It's cool, but we need something that's going to be a title. And then what happens when things change? We're going to get to that in just a little bit. Start off by doing something very similar with input, okay? It's text. The value is going to be author. Okay. I'm trying to get to the easy stuff. I'm trying to get the easy stuff on the page so that we can, when we start hitting the hard stuff, it'll make sense. We've got a button over here, and it needs some kind of on-click behavior, yes? It needs something to happen when we click it that, I mean, we talked about this, right? It should have something to do with pushing a title and an author to a post record function that will begin interacting with the routing server somewhere. Okay. So why don't we do the following? We need to define our button click function, yes? It's going to take a title and an author. So far, so good, right? And it should post the record, right? And then what? What happens when we get the response? Well, then what do we want to do afterward? Well, we want to post a record. And then somehow we want the state and app to get updated. We want it to be updated with the new values of the records, because now we've added a record, so that there should be one more to the array. So what we should do immediately after we post the records is we should get the records. We'll post a record, we'll get the records from Kintone, and then we'll have our new data, and then we will push that into the parent state. Oops. So what we want to do here is, after we post the records, is we want to get the records. And then what do we want to do? Well, then, whatever the result is, we want to pass that into set list items, so the parent component can do the appropriate update. Okay. So far, so good. We can see how we've used get records. We can see how we've used post records, but this use state function is strangely absent. And in fact, I've waited until now to talk about this until we have a good sense of how this input form is beginning to take shape. And so now here's a thought. Somebody types in that input box, right? How, whatever they're typing in, how does that turn into something that we can send? How does that turn into something that we can send? So there's an HTML answer, like this is an input box and this is an input box, and this is a submit button. Actually, it's not a submit button, but if it were a submit button, we would know that we're submitting this form onward to whatever is happening with the on-click behavior, which actually, by the way, we can fill out at this point. We know what we want to have happen is we're going to pass in title and author, right? The value, the title over here, kind of corresponds to the title we're passing, and the value of the author over here corresponds to the author over here. But this isn't HTML, folks. It's not. This is React, allowing us to play with HTML in our JavaScript as though it were HTML, which is not. This is just like syntactic sugar for some cool JavaScript happening behind the scenes. Okay. Well, the way that we want React to handle this is we want to create a state for the title and we want to create a state for the author. So then we've got React handling whatever the values are in those two input elements. There are lots of reasons why you might want to do this in React. For our purposes, it's pretty simple, but you might want to have, React, remember, React handles data flow behind the scenes. So if for some reason you want like whatever somebody's typing in to be something that you can hook behavior into, wouldn't it be handy to have a storage spot for what that data is right now? Like, let's say you wanted to say, I want a maximum of 10 characters for this input field, right? So wouldn't it be nice if you could have the state of that input field, where you could say like, oh, like is the length of this string less than or equal to 10? We're good. So that's what React lets you do. And that's the benefit of creating a state for these kind of input elements. What we're going to do is we're going to create a state for the title. And we're going to create a state for the author. Right? So what we've done is we've linked up the value of these input elements, whatever is the value of whatever's getting typed in there, with a state. And then it just lets us do a whole bunch of cool stuff. It could let us track what's changed over time more easily. So let's say you wanted to create, for example, you wanted to create a keylogger of whatever you want, of whatever you typed in there. You could use that state. And then every time the state gets updated, it passes the old state into like an array. And then you can show somebody what they've typed over time. That would be like an example of something you can do with this state. Okay. We just want to show you how you can pass data in a component in a way that's helpful. So we've created this button click. There's one other thing that we're going to do, which is we want to create a function that's going to handle the change in title. Oh, let me get this out of the way. I want to create a function that's going to handle the title change based on an event. And that's going to it's going to correspond with the onChange attribute of this input element. Okay. Same thing, we're going to want an onChange. We want to handle author change. And it's going to take in an event, which is like a DOM event. And then we're going to pass along the value of a key off of that, a value off of that object into set title, and we're going to do the same thing with set author. Okay. All right. So where does this land us? Well, let's take a look. Oh, what's happening over here? Get records. So what you should see at this point, if you did everything that I did, you should pull up your development server and you should get this type error. If you've done something different than I did, then you might be getting a different or more expected result. Let's take a look at what's happening over here. I am in get records, missing semicolon in line 24.
Genji's just going to check it on his side.
Yeah, that's great. So folks, remember when I said that if you don't have the right field code, you're in trouble? Well, we did something secret behind the scenes that we didn't tell you about, and that's we handled this unique key so that you don't have to. We can just focus on title and author. And the unique key has a field code called record underscore number by default. And it's possible that we may have changed that. And so Genji's checking that right now.
And I just updated the app.
Yeah, so in other words, if you did everything that we told you to do, you should not be running into this error. All right, here we go, there we are.
Hey.
There we go.
Okay. So folks, so sorry about the confusion. Turns out that it was our environment, not yours. If you did everything we went through, you should have turned out better than I have. I've fallen on my own sword over here, so to speak. But this is exactly what we're expecting. We now have a list of items. Here, let me refresh the page again. Take a look at how now loading quickly shows up as replaced by the response. Let's go ahead and add a title. I'm going to add my favorite book in over here, which has nothing to do with manga. We're going to post to Kintone. And what we're going to expect is that this page will refresh and we will see this post show up over here on the list. That's not what happened. I have something over here, an invalid request. So there's some other error that I have. Let's take a look at what it is. See somebody in the chat saying, I noticed request body on server.js is not being used. I don't see that that's the case. So, excuse me. Record, here I am with request body and post the request body, single record endpoint, options. Oh, there, that's right. Yeah, it's not being used. Good eye, Arthur. I love this part where we come together as a community to help the workshop trainer fix his own mess ups. Okay, what's missing over here is this line where I define the body that I'm passing in, request body. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and restart this app title. Catch 22, Joseph Heller. But still an invalid request. The message port closed before response was retrieved. So it sounds like my nodemon just hasn't had the time to spin up. And I think, so first of all, we did it. We did it.
What was the issue? All right.
I think the issue was I restarted nodemon. I didn't trust that the server came back after we did request body. So I just killed the process and restarted the process. Today, we created a React project on the front end, and we built out the key files to hook Kintone up into a backend. We learned about use state and use effect hooks and props and data flow in React, and we built out data flow from the backend to a function on the front end that handles the relationship to the backend routing, and then the actual component behavior that triggers those API call functions. We modified an express server on the backend, and we avoided CORS errors. And then we added an input form. We talked about the relationship between React state and the input form and how you can have state capture the on-change events of a user inputting keyboard strokes into an input element, as well as how we can then push that data into the state of its parent component and have it update update a sibling component by way of a parent component managing state. if you liked what we did, we've got more stuff on React and REST APIs. Will has written some terrific detail. God, folks, I want you to know that Genji and Will are just masterful at writing clear documentation. And so what can you do next? You can handle the response so that it renders as tables. In other words, you can play around with the way that the rendering happens on the React side. You can make some more post requests with some more Kintone API calls, or try using a public API from the list over here. You can deploy your app to Heroku, share your experience on dev.to. And if you're stuck, you can share your code on the Kintone developer community forum or in Stack Overflow.
So I just want to say, as Nim has said, thank you on behalf of them for your undivided attention and staying here. We really appreciate you guys sticking through till the very end, and just coming back to these workshops is very valuable to us. Also want to say a special shout out to our community partner, HackBuddy by JavaScript LA. And so if you guys really enjoy this content, you guys need to come back and join these future workshops. They are coming up with new content all the time and going over some of the stuff too that you've heard before. So it can really help you learn and practice with this kind of material. If you guys want to join the meetup, go to bit.ly/KDP_events. If you guys enjoyed the content that was covered tonight, you can watch this workshop's recording on YouTube. Just go to the bit.ly/KDP_video. And so for staying till the end, we like to give an opportunity for all of you to fill out a survey with the chance to win in a raffle for a $25 Amazon gift card. If you fill this out, it gives us feedback on the workshop and just lets us know what kind of content and material you guys enjoy, and just give more feedback of how to present and structure these workshops for you. So please fill this out. It is extremely helpful, not only for us, but also for your experience. So please go to bit.ly/KDP_Q, or use your phone and scan that QR code at your convenience. It's really easy. The survey is short and it doesn't take that much time, and it's very, very valuable.
We want to also add that for everybody who fills out post event survey, we'll be sending out swag.
What?
Yes, we finally got the swag system up and running. So for everybody who fills out the survey, you're entered to win the $25 gift card, but also everyone will be sent out an email collecting the address so that we could ship a couple of Kintone swag items over to your way.
I just want to make sure I'm getting this communication. So everyone who completes a survey gets swag.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh man, you lucky folks. This is the first. I swear to you, I'm not hyping this. This is the first time that I've been doing these workshops for what now, like a year and a half, more than that, less than. This is the first time that we've given away swag to everybody just for filling out a survey. So you lucky dogs.
So Kintone will be sponsoring the NASA International Space Apps Challenge Boston 2021. But you can obviously join other space app challenges in different areas as well. And I put the link inside the chat so you can access the space and you can join in from there. It's basically, it's just a hackathon about space. There is a choose a challenge page, which I'll also put in the chat as well. Basically, it shows the challenges that you can do for the hackathon. You know, during this workshop, you might have thought of ideas of using apps for your ideas that you have. Here are some ideas that NASA has. You can sort of imagine how they can fit in with Kintone. And if you're up for it, if you're up for the event, which is on early October, I think October 2nd and 3rd-ish.
October, oh shoot, this is Japan time.
It's in Boston time, and it's.
What's neat about the NASA hackathon is the first level, you're interacting with a whole bunch of teams that are based in and around Boston, although you do not need to be in Boston to do that. And we had some groups come up with some really interesting hacks. There was a group that like built something about measuring plant growth in space. There was another group that built out like used like a 3D gaming engine. I think it was Unity to sort of like imagine what it's like on Mars. And the judges were people, I mean, there was me, and then there was like a whole bunch of judges who were in industry, in aerospace engineering, and like had doctorates in all kinds of various different engineering disciplines. It was so cool to see what people built to satisfy the conditions of these challenges. It was, I think it was a lot of fun for all the participants to really kind of get their heads together and build something interesting and, you know, that relates to real problems that we're dealing with. What I would say is, if you love building stuff, you genuinely, I don't know, it doesn't even need to be space that interests you. It could just be like, because some of the problems that we're looking to solve in space are problems that we also want to solve over here on Earth. If doing that kind of work interests you, and you want to work with some cool people, hit up some of your colleagues over here, hit up some of your people at HackBuddy, or the other participants on this webinar, and see if you guys can like create a team and start thinking about what you might want to build. Super interesting and super fun. Which is, I just want to call out what Genji said in the chat, which is that it's entirely virtual. So if you're living in Morocco or Argentina, you can do it. Yes, folks,
Yes.
Thank you very much. We're calling it. Peace.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks, people.